Volvo is entering a new era, and cars like this EX30 small electric SUV are set to play a huge part in its transformation. Now, the brand says that from 2026, it will go all electric cars in Australia, and this car is set to be one of its best sellers. It's a brand new nameplate for the brand, and it's based on an all-electric architecture shared with its parent company, Geely. With that comes some exciting new developments, but also some new technology pitfalls. I'm going to tell you all about each of them, so let's get right into it. The Volvo EX30 makes its debut as the smallest vehicle in the carmaker's lineup, and it's the first dedicated electric vehicle on the brand's showroom floors. It's smaller than the Volvo EX40 and EC40, but it also comes with a more affordable price tag. Pricing kicks off from $59,990 for the entry-level single-motor variant, and there is a 3-strong range to choose from. But the one I'm focusing on is a flagship twin-motor variant which costs $71,290 before on-road costs. This sets it against competition such as a Cupra Born or a Tesla Model 3, which both start under the $60,000 barrier. If you're interested in buying a Volvo EX30 or either of those two rivals, then head on over to Drive's marketplace for plenty of new and used cars. One other boast that the EX30 can claim is being the quickest Volvo ever. The twin-motor all-wheel drive example I've got can sprint from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in a scant 3.6 seconds. That's a lot of shove from a little car. But more important for the everyday driver is the fact that the EX30 Twin Performance Ultra, the car that I've got, claims a 460 kilometer driving range from its 69 kilowatt-hour battery. There is more range offered by the less expensive single motor variants, but the car I'm in is fully stacked with features and equipment. I want to talk about this car's design because it is unmistakably Volvo in how it looks. Up front, you do get a set of Thor's hammer headlights and a modern-day interpretation of the diagonal Volvo emblem. But as you come further down the sides, you are getting a set of accentuated wheel arches, which do hide a set of 20-inch wheels on this top-grade specification. And as you come up the back of the car, you are getting a two-tone roof as well. In fact, all of these Volvo EX30s, there is no way to tell between different model variants. They all look basically the same, apart from those 20-inch wheels on this car. At the back, it's a nice, neat design. Very clean, very Scandinavian. Obviously, there are no badges on the back here apart from the Volvo script. Instead, they are relocated up here on the C-pillar. I also do quite like these twin light clusters, one down here on the boot and then one up here in the glass as well. The Volvo's charge port is on the left-hand side here, and it does allow up to 153 kilowatts of DC fast charging. Theoretically, that does allow for a 10 to 80% charge in just under 30 minutes. That is not the quickest rate, but keep in mind that this does have a 69 kilowatt-hour battery, and that is pretty small, so it does replenish quite quickly. Here we are with what I think is one of the most interesting aspects of the Volvo EX30 experience. Its straightforward and minimalist presented cabin. Now, I want to first talk about the materials that Volvo has used in this cabin's construction, because they have placed a huge emphasis on being sustainable and environmentally friendly. And not only does it have that feel-good aspect of having something recycled, but it actually does feel good as well, because when you do touch things like the fabric inserts on the seats or the leatherette sort of coverings around the center console and on the seat lowers, it does feel really nice to the touch. But it doesn't end there, because you do have these really sort of nice metallic door handles, which I think they are a little bit of a statement piece. And in addition to that, you do get blue sort of plastic inserts throughout the dash, which really do lift this cabin's appeal. It's not all good news, because Volvo has used some hard plastics throughout the cabin. You'll see them on the door panels down here and underneath the dash. But I do like the fact that they've left some sort of imperfections, because it is recycled plastic and you do have that sort of little feel-good aspect to it. Now, one thing I also do want to mention is the fact that these seats are classic Volvo. They are super supportive and very comfortable on longer drives. And they actually feel good as well. The material feels fantastic. Storage-wise, the Volvo EX30 comes with a ton of nifty hidey holes to store your odds and ends. Now, starting with the pop-out center console, which does contain a pair of cup holders, and it does come with 2 clicks, so you can put it back into one, or you can hide it all together. In addition, you do have a slot down here on the floor, and it does have a lid as well, so you can hide away your items from people looking inside the cabin. That is really handy. Down here, you also do have dual USB-C ports. You do have a wireless smartphone charger underneath the dashboard here, and you do get a glove box as well, but you do have to action it on the screen. There you go, pops down like so. It isn't particularly capacious, but it does have space for the manual. Speaking of the manual, I'm surprised that this is the best that Volvo can do in the EX30, a cardboard little manual holder there, but there you go. The EX30's controls, be they mirror adjustment, glove box release, or seat adjustments, aren't as easy as having individual buttons. Half these controls are changed within the infotainment menus, and I'd like to see things be easier to change, not more difficult. As well, the touch-sensitive buttons for the windows or on the steering wheel need a decisive and accurate push to make them work correctly. One other gripe, I really do wish that this Volvo had a digital instrument cluster or even a head-up display to display speed and critical driving information. Instead, I do have to glance away from the road and look at the infotainment screen to see my speed and ensure that I am kept under the limit. The absence of a head-up display really does feel like a bit of a miss in this car. Now, to what feels like the main event in this Volvo EX30, the big 12.3-inch display mounted smack bang on the dashboard here. It does feel like Volvo has taken a lot of inspiration from Tesla in this regard because just about everything is controlled via the touchscreen. It does have critical driving information displayed on a letterbox up the top of the screen there, and it does control things like speed and so you can monitor your gear. But otherwise, everything is controlled by the Android-based software underneath. It is pretty easy to use because you do have shortcuts along the bottom, and it does have quick processing power to scroll through menus as well. We have seen out of Europe that some EX30 owners are experiencing software issues, and unfortunately I did have some on my tester. The ones that I saw related to the system reverting to factory defaults after each restart, an incorrect time displaying on the screen, and I saw the 360-degree camera appearing heavily letterboxed. I spoke to Volvo Australia, which said an over-the-air update is inbound and it should help fix these issues, though the update wasn't available in time for me to test out. That said, the phone and Google integration of this system is really good in general because a lot of the car will be controlled using a smartphone, and particularly since this key that the Volvo comes with, it doesn't have any buttons on it, so you will be using your phone to unlock and pop the boot when you do need it. But I really do wish that Volvo did place some sort of buttons to unlock the doors or pop the boot on the key, particularly since that the only way to lock this car physically from the outside is on the driver's door here. That is the only lock button in this car. At present, the car doesn't come with Apple CarPlay, though it is set to join the system at a later date with an over-the-air update. The fact that this is a smaller SUV is really driven home as soon as you jump inside the second row, because there is no space here whatsoever. Granted, I am pretty tall at 194 centimeters, but this space is best reserved for kids. Behind my own driving position, I have non-existent legroom, and while I do have a decent amount of space above my head, I wouldn't want to spend too long back here at all. There's not much in the way of amenities either, because while you do have window controls and USB-C ports on the back of the center console here, you don't have map pockets, you don't have a fold-down center armrest, and you don't have that much space in the door panels for bottles or coffee cups either. The only storage you really do have are pockets in the back of the center console here, one little slot beneath the window switches, and you do have this pull-out tray, which is making it easier to clean as well. Interestingly, there are no speakers in the second row. The entire car is serviced by a soundbar-like Harman Kardon system mounted underneath the windscreen. You might think a lack of surround sound is a bad thing, but the single output speaker punch is strong and you can easily hear the clear audio in the second row. Much like that cool Harman Kardon sound system, all variants get a power-assisted boot which opens to reveal a tight 318-litre space. Now there is stowage underneath the false floor here which you can hide away items in, but overall, it is really tight for a small SUV and there is not that much capacity. It also doesn't get a spare wheel, just a tyre repair kit. If you do want ultimate carrying capacity, you can fold down the rear seats in a 60/40 format to give you a full 914-litre space, but overall, it is pretty tight in the back here. Jump to the front now, and Volvo has thought of additional storage spaces to stow things like the charging cables. So while it doesn't have outright literage, at least Volvo has thought of additional areas to stow your odds and ends. Jump inside the car, put my belt on, there we go, pull that stalk down, and away we go. It's that simple to get going in the Volvo EX30, and the instantaneous nature of being able to jump in and just go is kind of novel these days. Of course, Volvos have done it before in the XC40 electric, but I do like that ability to sort of jump in and just go instantaneously. The first major change that you'll find in this Volvo EX30 compared to conventional cars and compared to electric cars is the fact that there is no digital instrument cluster. All the driving information is placed on that central infotainment screen, and there's a little bit of a letterbox section right up the top there where it shows speed, sort of a live view of the traffic and ADAS systems around you. And you also have things like light controls and indicators and that sort of thing. But I kind of really do wish that the car had some kind of display right in front of the driver, whether it be a head-up display or they repurpose the driver monitoring software that's right above the steering wheel there. I really do wish that you had some sort of at-a-glance visibility of speed, because a lot of the time you are driving this car and you're looking over the infotainment screen and then the car will tell you, keep your eyes on the road. And that's so annoying because they're placing the speed and that sort of thing on the infotainment screen. I'm simply looking there to monitor my speed. So why are you telling me to look at the road ahead when you're placing all that critical driving information in their infotainment? At the end of the day, it is pretty easy to sort of divert your eyes and glance across, even if it is going to chastise you. Just going over a few speed humps right now in suburban Victoria, and the ride control of this Volvo EX30 is really well damped. Now, it's not a soft and pliant ride, but it is a little bit sporty, but you don't really sort of get those road impacts over little imperfections, and even when you are going over speed humps like we are now, there's actually not that much intrusion inside the cabin. So Volvo has done a really good job on this car's ride control, and it is kind of something that Volvo is known for. Now, there is not that much in the way of driving modes and settings. You really do just have to go into the infotainment here, have a little bit of a play around. It's not the easiest thing to change, but you do have a performance all-wheel drive option where it will sort of prioritize putting those two motors to work rather than prioritizing range. When you do press that performance all-wheel drive mode, the performance is absolutely incredible. Now, this is a small Volvo SUV. I don't know why you want it to go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 3.6 seconds, but the ability is certainly there and it feels extremely fast. Like most electric cars, the Volvo EX30 is serviced by a single-speed transmission, and it's really responsive to throttle inputs. You put your foot down and the car immediately reacts, serving up appropriate torque and power. But one thing I do want to call out is the fact that this car is really quiet. Now, obviously, it doesn't have an engine to sort of have that little bit of noise coming through into the cabin, but everything else is really subdued. There's not that much wind noise. There is not that much road noise, particularly on its large 20-inch wheels. And even when you are on the freeway, there isn't that much noise intrusion coming inside the cabin. It does a really good job at keeping a nice, quiet sort of refinement inside the interior. Where the lesser specified Volvo EX30s have around 200 kilowatts, this dual motor version has 315 combined kilowatts, which is absolutely rapid in a car of this size. Now, in addition to that, you do have 543 newton meters of torque, and I like the way that both these dual motors do work together. There's not sort of a sense of one motor pushing harder than the other or a bit of a disconnect between the two. It is really tied together and it is really explosive when you do lean on the throttle. I did say before that I have had a few little technical issues on this car, and one of them does rear its head when you are trying to change this car's adaptive cruise control system, because you'll go into the settings here on the infotainment screen and go into driving and set time interval to car ahead. I press it to short to make that following distance as short as possible, and it automatically reverts to long. It's just one of those technical issues that have sort of cropped up in my time with the car. I do hope that Volvo will fix them with new over-the-air updates, but at the time being, it is really annoying. Another thing you don't get with the lack of a digital instrument cluster is live sort of at-a-glance visibility of fuel or electric consumption, because you can view it on the infotainment system here, but it does take a little bit of a fiddling around to get it doing so. So I can see right now that the car is doing about 20.8 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and that is pretty thirsty for a small SUV electric vehicle. We want to see sort of around the 15 kilowatt hours per 100 for a vehicle of this size, but it isn't the sort of experience that I've had with the car. It's been sitting around 20 kilowatt hours all week. Granted, I haven't been driving this car around town much. It has been largely freeway use, so it hasn't had that chance to sort of recuperate a lot of its energy on brake recuperation, but that still is pretty high. While we are talking about brakes, this Volvo EX30's brake pedal isn't the most refined experience, because you will lean on the throttle and it does engage its brake regeneration. But when you do sort of really lean on the pedal to get that friction braking working from the calipers, there is a sort of weird disconnect there, and it doesn't have a sort of seamless feeling that you really do get in a conventional car. When you are driving the car around town like we are at the moment, I have found that its tight dimensions are really easy to place on the road, and particularly when you are parking, it is really easy to maneuver into spots. One thing that is personal preference, I don't really like the squared off steering wheel that the EX30 gets. In addition to the lack of a digital cluster that does really annoy me, Volvo has made some other weird choices in this car because it doesn't have individual window controls. You do have just two down here on the center console, and they do activate the rear windows, but only after you press the rear button, and you do have to be really specific with your press on that button, because if you sort of press around the rear script, it doesn't automatically work every single time. I'm pressing it now and it's obviously not working, so there you go. And it's the same sort of story when you are using the steering wheel controls. You do have change track and volume functions on the steering wheel, and you do have to be really accurate when you are pressing those, because otherwise it doesn't engage the function that you want it to when you are pressing it if you are inaccurate. Overall, the driving experience inside the Volvo EX30 is really one of its greatest assets, because it drives exactly like you'd expect a Volvo to. It's nice, it's quiet, it's comfort, and it's very refined as well. As Volvo's first ground-up electric car, this little EX30 makes a lot of sense for its intended buyer. It is unashamedly tech-focused for singles or couples, and it's not a family car. As long as you don't need those back seats and you are a fan of its unique quirks, this car will shake up the electric vehicle market in Australia. But it's not perfect. Hopefully Volvo does fix this car with its little tech issues with an over-the-air update, and maybe you might want to leave it for its next update in iteration, but otherwise, if you are dead keen on this Volvo EX30, I can see it impressing you in the long term. Now, if you have enjoyed this video or learned something interesting about this little Volvo EX30, be sure to give it a like on YouTube and stay subscribed to get all of our future content. As well, you can read the full review on Drive.com.au. While this has been an interesting look at the Volvo EX30, it isn't the only EV in the market, particularly a small one. You obviously do have the very popular Tesla Model 3 and also cars like the Cupra Born. Now, I've reviewed the Cupra Born before, and you can check out that video by clicking above us right now.